Pre-bureau, we used to talk about running applications through a manual format. Do you commit to your payment obligations? Do you pay your bills on time? Do you pay your... I think we started with one product. Now we have over 10 products that really are much more geared towards risk management and insights.
Hello and welcome to the first edition of the Power of Insights podcast from Etihad Bureau. My name's Hamad and I'm delighted for our first episode to welcome His Excellency Marwan Lutfi, the Director General of the Bureau. Your Excellency, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Hamad.
Your Excellency, before we even get started on today's discussion, I'd love for you to maybe share with us a time when you maybe felt the power of insights.
Well, there are so many things that I can talk about. When we started the company over a decade ago, I don't think insights was something that was actually very commonly talked about. I remember when we started building a credit database and bureau, one of the funny stories that one of our dear friends from the financial institutions told us was pre-bureau, we used to talk about running applications through a manual format and really asking people to declare how many credit cards they've actually had, what exposure they have. So at least when they're applying for a credit card, they would know what actually is, whether they're eligible or not. But after the bureau, at one incident, I remember a CEO of an esteemed institution told us, it's very funny how now things change, because all of a sudden you see people declaring things that are not matching the reality in the database. And in one incident, he said that there is actually someone saying, I just have one credit card with a limit of 10,000 dirhams, but in reality, he had actually 20 credit cards with a limit of 50,000 dirhams each. And that is where you're actually looking at saying insights. You know, that is really the power of insights, is understanding, you know, how do you tread into these waters before you get into them, being it a financial institution, be it into government, basically, and providing services to the customers and services. Understanding the risk you're getting into makes you make better decisions.
So yeah, it's what you don't know is what is important, right? So getting insight into those hidden, data points and information points can make all the difference. Thank you for that. I think you mentioned obviously credit and borrowing a little bit just in your response there. Maybe let's take a step back and perhaps we can hear from you. What is a credit bureau and why do we even need one here in the UAE?
Well, the UAE was probably the last out of the GCC countries to set up a credit bureau. And at the setup phase in 2013, we were visiting our colleagues in the GCC to understand from their experiences. But of course, the UAE has a very dynamic market, very different than the neighboring countries that we have. But the most important thing of why a bureau needs to be set up is actually access to finance. Mm-hmm. In many situations, when you're actually trying to apply for a facility, generally from a bank to start off with, you will probably be rejected when you don't have enough history. And the banks generally would want to know what sort of behavior do you do? Do you commit to your payment obligations? Do you pay your bills on time? Do you pay your utilities and other obligations on time? And that generally gives you a sense of whether this person is going to commit to the future payments they have in the future. And that's really what a bureau is all about. It's about almost an X-ray of that person, saying a health check on whether they're actually committed, have they actually had any problems, are there any red flags that they're there, so that the entity that's actually assessing that person, whether it's for a facility or for a kind of service that might be paid over installments, and saying, how can I really price it or actually decide whether these individuals or companies are eligible for it or not.
Right. So actually it's like a best practice then. So the GCC was already adopting the concept of bureaus, and I know other markets also have that. So really it's a sign of the maturity of the Emirates to say that we're actually operating in the standards and with that level of insight that you would expect in a mature financial ecosystem.
Yes. Maybe the UAE came in last because also the UAE has a very different model than the GCC. Okay. Because the Central Bank of the UAE, which of course regulates the financial service sector and looks after the health of the financial sector, has always had a risk bureau. The only thing is they will look at systemic risk and much larger risks that really will impact the economy. When the bureau was created, it was created in the law to be actually regulated by the central bank. It was actually to look after everyone basically with any single exposure of 1 dirham and above. And that is where sometimes you say the biggest risk lies when it comes to retail credit, the average credit cards of 10,000 dirhams or 5,000 dirhams or 20,000 dirham limits. And that is something that generally from a systemic point of view might not cause a lot of risk, hence why the Bureau was created to say, actually, let's look after the mega aspect of all of the retail customers as well, including the companies.
Okay, so I know you've been at the Bureau pretty much since its inception. I think it's just over maybe 10 years or so now that we've had Etihad Bureau in the Emirates. Maybe you could just tell us a bit of the story so far as to what's actually happened in the time you've been at the helm and what brings us all the way up to today.
I think the Bureau has a great team, but the team also has changed over time. When the Bureau was set up in the beginning, it was simply to aggregate data of the financial exposures and whether these individuals and companies are paying their dues on time and whether they were bouncing checks. That was the initial phase. When you aggregate this, you create a database that anyone can tap into with the right consent in place. You can access the history of an individual or a company and you would know how that company was behaving so that you can make better decisions. But that was the basics, because we thought we're going to solve one problem, which is aggregating data and centralizing it and making it easier to access. But then as we evolved, we saw that there are more different needs in the market and how things would change. And I think we started with one product. Now we have over 10 products that really are much more geared towards risk management and insights for various entities. We started off with the banking sector, but now several sectors use us, telcos, utilities, governments, car leasing companies, so many different angles come to this. And I think that's one of the most important things that we said when we created the Bureau was how can we add value? And adding value to the economy, but also adding value to individuals and companies. In many cases, we might be seen as the entity that penalizes individuals or companies for not enabling them to access finance. But in reality, it's the other way around. We're actually saying, these are some of the things that the institutions are concerned about, which means if you change your behavior over time, you'll actually be able to access finance.
So that's an interesting point, because I know we often hear this, which is people can assume the credit bureau has rejected a credit application. So if somebody applies for a credit card or car finance and for whatever reason they get a rejection on their application, it's commented that the Bureau has made that decision. Maybe you can help clarify this situation, whether the Bureau is actually, making a judgment on somebody's application or not.
Well, unfortunately, until now, this still happens. And I think it's natural given the UAE's dynamic sort of demographic population, the diversity that we have here. People coming from over 200 nationalities. Some come from established markets that have dealt with credit bureaus for decades. And some don't even know what the credit bureau is about. Even from our side, communicating with the community is not an easy task, because you're doing a gunshot approach, where you're saying, look, I'm trying to hit and cover everyone possible, so at least I increase financial literacy, I increase awareness. But in reality, you're actually probably hitting 5 or 6 different nationalities at one time. So for us, it's very important when we look at these things and saying, okay, what changed? And what changes means it's a collaborative effort. We see the bank slowly changing. It's the teller at the bank that you're dealing with, or the agent on the phone, that actually needs to understand about what the Bureau is about. And it's very easy to say that the Bureau actually is the one that decided, but in reality, even by law, we're not allowed to actually create any or provide any decision whether to allow or disallow or actually even label whether someone is eligible or not. We provide indicators, we provide insights that give you the ability to make that decision. And each entity will actually change the risk appetite from one time to another. We don't change our data. The data stays same. That you change depending on how the market and economics and the market basically is behaving. And I think that's one of the most important things where people will have to realize over time. We probably have done much more when it comes to the institutional side, and starting, I would say, Q4 this year, we'll probably be pushing much stronger on the consumer side, because we have a duty to ensure that everyone in the UAE today that has an active credit record with us should know what the Bureau is about, what is the credit report, and how their credit score can impact their lives.
So it's actually everybody is treated the same. So your data, your behavior, your profile, regardless of nationality, and all of these assumptions that sometimes people can make that certain people have favored or not. Actually, what you're saying is at the Bureau, the aggregation of that information is done the same throughout the population. And so we play that insight back after it's been analyzed, and there's no discrimination in data.
I mean, in the end of the day, you probably said it right. It's objectivity. And I think that's one of probably the key things, even when we launched the credit score in 2018. It was around 2017 when we started modeling the credit score, and with a lot of discussions with the regulator, the Central Bank of the UAE, where they were questioning the model itself. They're looking at how the models were developed. And that is one of the key propositions that we actually said, that it is completely digital. It does not look at who's the sitting at the other end. You don't know whether you're inquiring on, someone who might be a very high-profile person, or someone who's actually, just a white-collar worker, or a company by itself. It's all about the data, and the data does not lie. If the data says something, basically, then that indicator and score will tell you how this person that owns this data is actually going to possibly behave over the next few months or a year in terms of their payment obligations, and whether they are going to be defaulting or actually missing any specific payments. So that was a key aspect for us when we're developing also credit scores, that there is zero subjectivity when it comes to this assessment and indication of risk.
Okay, so the credit score then is that indicator. So that uses all of this information and data to come up with a reference number that actually indicates your behavior profile or your likelihood to maintain a credit or a payment obligation. So is that the correct explanation? Maybe you can again help clarify for the record what an actual credit score is and why it's important for people to know what their credit score is.
Yeah, a credit score is something that might be a little bit too technical, where a lot of institutions would embed these sort of risk models in their place, and they will understand what the difference between a 720 and a 750 or a 680, for example. But in reality, it's a range that actually tells you the higher the score is, the better someone is in meeting their payment obligations. And the lower that score, that actually it seems that this person is most likely that they're going to be missing payments in the future.
Okay.
And that's generally how institutions use to provide the initial screening of how I would actually look at an individual or a company that's actually applying for some sort of service or facility. I remember when we launched the credit score in 2018, the pickup was actually quite slow until everyone understands how it is and how it's embedded in the systems. But if you notice, over the past several years right now, all of the in-principle approvals that you get, be it applying online, be it for a credit card or a mortgage, it's actually all embedded right now with that. Because if you don't get an indicator that actually is able to screen, that's exactly what basically was missing at that time. Your processing time would actually take, sometimes days or hours if you're actually lucky. But right now, it's all systems talking to one another. It's directly integrated, and hence why you see a lot of in-principle approvals, instant approvals, aggregators working on providing you with the best possible financial solutions for you and financial credit facilities, because they're completely integrated and they can actually screen you and actually move you into this process much faster.
That's where we are today, where it's digital, it's integrated, as you say, it's enabling even automatic decision making, and insights are flowing. You mentioned also a few dates, 2018 from the start of the score. Maybe you had some interesting milestones in that last 10 years that you can help just confirm the story again so far as to what it really took to get to this point where we have an established bureau fully integrated into the credit ecosystem.
In 2015, I think, was our first official year of launch. And we had one product, which was really, or technically two products. It's a credit report, one product, but actually a credit report for individuals and a credit report for companies. And at that time, in the first year, as we started being integrated in the financial community specifically, we issued around 1 million credit reports in the first year of operation. But as we progressed, we developed our products, and until today, Our credit reports are much deeper in terms of data points that actually not only coming from the banking sector, but actually has several different other data points, utilities, telcos, courts, so many different data points, and some new government entity data points that's going to be integrated to create that comprehensive view of that individual or company and what their status is in terms of meeting their obligations, or they're defaulting on or late on paying certain obligations. And with that, as we moved on, we started expanding our products selection. We have a lot of advanced products that actually fulfill a lot of risk management requirements for several different sectors. And last year in 2024, when we see the evolution of our products and the breadth of what we're offering to the market, I'm happy to say that we issued over 14 million credit reports and scores in 2024.
Wow.
And that by itself is a testament to how important data is, how even embedded data became, especially over the last 5-7 years. You know, the whole changes in digital transformation, of course, AI recently, but before that, it was moving into paperless operations, and then moving into cashless operations, and then moving into complete digital operations. Well, for us, when we started this company, even back in 2012, it was always a 100% digital company. And that's how we've always built our integration with the systems. And of course, we evolve them as we speak. But I think that's the idea, really. The more integrated it is, the better services the institutions can actually provide to individuals and companies.
So you provide the data to the institutions digitally. What about to the individuals as well? Is it digital services? What kind of services can we access as?
Well, we started, of course, over the counter. And when we set up the offices as well in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, we didn't know what will happen. We didn't know where we're going, but the demand, it was more of an institutional company where we're dealing digitally with the banks, but with customers, we actually have the ability to access us through our offices in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And people were coming over the counter. We were printing credit reports of 20, 30 pages because we didn't think the demand was high. But as we started getting integrated into the system, we saw the customer, basically walk-in customers, increasing in numbers. At one time, we used to receive around 300 customers a day. And most of these customers would want to purchase their credit reports, access it, and there's the process of verifying over the counter and doing so many things was actually cumbersome. And with that, when we saw that there's a pickup and there's a need for financial awareness, then we actually started the digital channels in 2018. And that's when we moved into complete digitization of how an individual can buy his credit report or her credit report. Then it became fully digitized. And in reality, after we launched our digital channels in 2018, 2 months in, we had a drop of 80% into our customer service centers specifically. And that number has continued to drop. Today, we believe individuals can buy through our apps or our websites or even our partner basically integrations with the likes of TEM in Abu Dhabi or Dubai Now here and other government platforms and super apps in the near future. Now, the idea is how you can access the credit report and credit score through apps and platforms that you used every single day, be it banks, be it government portals and other entities. And that's something that we proudly can say right now. I would say, I can't say 100%, but I'd say 99.9% of all of our transactions are taking place digitally today with individuals as well.
Okay. So we have the access, we have the integrations with the banks, and we've seen the growth from year 1 million to 14 million more recently. Where are we going next as the Bureau, or what can we expect to see in the Emirates as far as Etihad Bureau is concerned?
Well, for us, we think we look at a certain metric, because maybe I say 1 million, 14 million, it might make sense and says, wow, that's great growth. But in reality, the metric we're looking at is really, how can we ensure that every single individual in the UAE today can actually access their credit report and understand what goes in it, because it's a historic document. It's not a document that say, yes, credit score changes dynamically every single day, every single minute. If the data changes, your credit score changes as well. So which means you can access your credit score and you can say, I can buy a credit score right now, a week later, a month later, I can buy it, every single month, and you can track how your credit score indicator is actually working based on that. But what makes a credit score is that sort of credit history that you have. And that credit history in the credit registry is something that you own. you own, which means your behavior creates it. If I make my payments, if I don't miss my payments with certain banks or certain entities as well, all of that is reflected in your credit record. And with that specifically, that's the most important thing, is what metric we're looking at is how can I ensure that every individual in the UAE actually accesses their credit report on an annual basis, if not even more. Because in reality, it's just like, when you go and visit a doctor for a health check. If you're at a certain age, you might visit a doctor every year. But even if you're at 5 years old today, you probably visit a dentist every single year at least once, right? And I think that's what we're trying to aim is, if you don't ensure that you look at how these things are really adding up into your credit history, how are they possibly going to impact you going forward, then you will at one time face issues. You will not be able to access finance. You'll not be able to gain some of these facilities and sort of services that you might want, because you never paid attention to what happened in the past. And the credit history goes back more than 10 years, but in reality, your credit report has your history of 3 years, which means, if you have missed a check, 6 months ago, and another check 9 months ago, and another check 12 months ago, all of that will show in your history. And these are the things that we say, without knowing what goes into your credit history, you will not be able to fix it going forward. And that's one of the metrics that we would like all of the 4 million plus borrowers in the UAE today to actually be able to access them. And that's why we're expanding our reach to say, you access it wherever makes more sense to you, be it in our new app, that might be in our new website, it might be at your government portal and everything. And that's the idea of what we want to be doing.
Interesting. And so you mentioned checks there also. I'd love to just get an update from you on how checks are seen in terms of payment obligations. There's a lot of noise locally and internationally about the use of checks and what it means in terms of a commitment. What's changed, or what is the current status? And again, what is the Bureau doing to help people understand the impact of check payments?
There's a lot of statistics around checks, and I think the Central Bank of the UAE publishes as well how many checks are issued every single year, and the central bank has done a great deal on how we can reduce that sort of impact of bounce checks as well. I think, if I recall, the numbers were roughly around 30 million checks issued last year, and the bounce check rates were actually below 2%, which was, I think, a few years before was around 4%. And when you look at these things, the numbers are improving. But also there's been a reduction in the number of checks being issued because of the facilitation of payments through digital forms, be it direct debits, be it the online transfers. So many things right now that you can access digitally and you can instantly transfer. ANI is one form of payment that actually the central bank recently introduced as well, which is instant payments, and that is literally instant. So once you click a button, it moves from one account to the other account, and that's how the infrastructure has been provided by the central bank. But all of these tools will eventually come down to actually reduce the number of checks. However, maybe from an individual perspective, because the UAE still is a trading country, and traders will always be dealing in checks. Post-dated checks is something that is very common. And that's where we think, the companies will still continue to use checks, because it's a very normal way. It happens in most of the advanced markets. You purchase goods on consignment and then you pay later. And that's a form of payment. A PDC, or a post-dated check, which is very common with traders, is actually exactly the same thing. I'm just buying this on a consignment with a promise to pay in the future. And I think these are things that, from our side also, we created products which was aligned with the decriminalization of bouncing checks, specifically in 2022, where we launched products that will give you the likelihood of a check bouncing, so at least you can make better decisions. In the past, you would take a check, but in reality, if you've been a trader, you'd normally know Hamad, or the person behind it, and say, well, I've trusted him, I've worked with him for 5 years, I can take his check. But if someone comes in and says, I want to buy this consignment, you have no visibility on who this person is, how long this is a new setup of a company, are they going to pay or not on time? And these are things that generally you can look at how, a check is worthy, whether actually to take as a guarantee for a future payment. And if that person behind the check, issuing the check, has some sort of credit history that actually shows a trend of actually defaulting or missing payments, then you'll get it instantly as well. Once you do a check instantly to know, well, there's a likelihood of a probability of bounce of 50% or 30% or whatever it may be. And that also for us is very important, that we're always adding one more data point for the individual to make a better decision, whether it's an individual or company. But the more data you have, the better decision you can make. And that's our duty, to see how can we increase these data points so that you can make better collective decisions.
Well, making decisions based on insights is definitely something it sounds like the Bureau is doing, and the insights that you've shared with us today are immensely powerful. So I feel as though we could talk about this topic forever, and for sure we need to contain that conversation for a future date. Your Excellency, will you join us for a future episode once we see some of the questions and comments from the public as to what they'd like to hear from you?
Well, our duty as a government entity is to be here to receive anything in the public. It's very important that the Bureau today does not evolve without the involvement of the public or its community of users as well. We listen to our banks. The evolution of the product development has been immense over the past decade. And in reality, we also still feel that we're falling short. And I think that's one of the biggest probably motivations that gives us, from a Bureau perspective, is we are here to serve the community. We are here to serve the better interest of the economy and the government of the UAE and the business community, companies or the individuals that are seeking to make the UAE home for them. And with that, any comment that we take, we take into consideration. Any feedback that we gets into our review and analysis and really development pipeline that actually makes sure that we provide better products that actually suit the needs of the business and the market.
Fantastic. Well, I certainly hope that this conversation was useful to the people who have watched it or listened to it on their podcast channels and apps. I hope they get to subscribe and hear more from the Bureau and the guests that we intend to discuss the power of insights for. And for sure, the comments that we receive, it sounds like we'll definitely be, willing to address and respond. So once again, I'm going to thank you for joining us on the first episode. I think you've set the benchmark for all of us, as the Bureau does across the industry. So thank you once again, Your Excellency. And we'll look forward to hosting you again in a future episode.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you.